The Spanish colonial period was marked by the Spanish Moro Wars or the Moro Wars, fought in 6 stages spanning 4 centuries. The colonists called the Muslim natives Moros after their hated enemy, the Moors.
It is the 18th century, and life for some coastal inhabitant of the Philippines was anything but identical. Without warning, they could be attacked by the merciless Ilano, the raiders of the Salud Sea.
When the Ilanon or pirates capture people, they would bore a hole through their palms or put a string through the palms of each person.
These raiders were fearsome and fearless in battle, even against better armed, technologically superior colonial forces. To the western colonies, the raiders were nothing more than barbaric catwalks or fires, and they were hunted down as such.
It is very hard for someone who's not used to seeing slave reading to understand. Slave reading during those time was legal. So, as not to make it difficult for people, why slave reading is then legal? Because slave reading during those time was a business.
There is a speculation that these raiders were not savages they were made out to be, but merely indigenous people defending their way of life against a foreign oppressor. But there is a little doubt that these raiders were skilled fighters. They were also expert sailors and builders of formidable vessels of war, but these were no ragtag band of marauders. They were a well-organized force that could attack with precision and strategy, and they gave the Western colonial forces a run for their money. It is December 8, 1720. The southernmost reaches of Spanish-occupied Philippines stand Zamboanga City, protecting the city's port pillar. The garrison of 600 Spanish soldiers have already fought off several local rebels' attempts to the fort, but on this day they will face a threat of unprecedented proportion. Leading their way, hundreds of ships carrying 3,000 battle-hardened raiders. The Spaniards are grossly outnumbered. The battle for Fort Pilar is about to begin. Zamboanga City sits at the tip of the southernmost peninsula of the Philippines. It is by no means a bustling metropolis these days, but is still strategically located along an important sea route between the northern and southern region of the Philippines. It was Zamboanga's geographical advantage that made it valuable to the Catholic Spaniard who colonized it in the 16th century. To protect their interests, the Spanish colonies built forts to discourage potential invaders. At the front line of these defenses was Fort del Pilar, a 10-meter high fortress that sprawled over 2 acres.
One of the most celebrated attack on Fort Pilar was the 1720. Ilang pagsalakay, nalampasan ng Fort del Pilar taong 1720. Sinalakay ito ng mga hukbo ni Dalasi, King of Bulig, kasama ang mga 3,000 Muslim. Noong 1798, ibinumba naman ito ng mga British, naging bilangguan din ito ng 70 katao noong 1872. Inabandona ng mga Espanyol noong 1898 at inakupa ng mga Hapon noong 1942. Noong ika-4 ng Hulyo 1946, inilipat sa Pilipinas ang pamamahala sa Moog.
The Sulu and Maguindanao Sultanates were then the two main kingdoms controlling the Muslim colonies of the southern Philippines. With the king of Maguindanao, Rahadalasi, the him, they launched a bloody attack on Fort.
He attacked Zamboanga, burned the town around the world. Pinutol niya ang mga probisyon para sa mga Kastila at nagsimulang makipagdigma sa mga sundalo sa loob ng kuta.
But taking the port would not be easy for Rahadalasi and his fighters. This was a structure designed to withstand even the destructive force of cannonballs. Every possible approach to the port was defended by rows of Spanish artillery. But even with their superior defenses and weaponry, the Spanish soldiers are greatly outnumbered 1 to 5. Rahadalasi's militia, armed with only an assortment of swords, plunged aggressively into battle against the cannons and firearms of the Spaniards. Rahadalasi's men are decimated by cannon fire, but they are relentless. Wave after wave of raiders attacked the fort until they finally reached the outer wall. The Spanish soldiers resort to desperate measures to fend off the raiders. They throw rocks and boiling water on the Lasis men as they scale the wall of the fort. Rahadalasi's raiders fight with a vengeance. Their desire to rid Zamboanga of the Spanish drives them forward.
Really had to suppress the Spanish presence here in the peninsula. The fort was the best operation to check on slave riding going to the north and coming back. Ang sagupang Kastila at Moro ay isang serye ng mga labanan sa Pilipinas na tumagal ng ilang siglo. Nagsimula ito noong panahon ng Kastila at tumagal hanggang sa digmaang Espanyol-Amerikano nang sa wakas ay nagsimulang sakupin ng Espanya ang mga Moro pagkaraan ng mga siglo nang hindi natupad nito.
According to some historians, slavery had been practiced among some tribes in the Philippines before the arrival of Western powers, but it was never a widespread or frequent activity. But the arrival of the Spanish and their desire to dominate trade in the region would trigger an escalation of slave raiding. The people of the southern sultanates would defy the self-proclaimed Spanish master by targeting Christian communities in the north. The Spanish referred to the slave raiders as Moro after the Muslim fighters they encountered on Spanish soil some 75 years earlier. But they were, in fact, from 3 different tribes, and they would challenge Spanish authority throughout its occupancy. The pirates, who were described by colonial powers, involved activities of different tribes in Mindanao, as well as the Sulu archipelago. But there were actually 3 different groups of Muslims that were identified in these colonial sources. So the first one was the Balangini tribe or Samal that occupied the chain of island between Basilan and Sulu Island. So Balangini, also known as Northern Sama or Northern Sinama, is an ethnologistic group living on the Great Sulu Archipelago and the southern and western coastal regions of the Zamboanga Peninsula in Mindanao. The second one was very important in piracy history, the Ilanons. So Ilanon in a Malay term meaning pirates is appropriate for the people of this ethnic group who were regarded as the first pirates in the Malay area. They are nothing but a barbaric for the western colonist. Lastly, Tausug tribe.
So the Tausug tribe are part of the wider political identity of Muslims of Mindanao, Sulu, and Palawan. The Ilanons and Samal-Balangingi were both long-standing seafaring communities. They often joined forces with the Tausug, a tribe without maritime experience but known for its fierce warriors and widespread political powers.
The Ilanon and Samal were both long-standing seafaring communities. They would often join forces with the Tausug, a tribe without a maritime experience but known for its fierce warrior and widespread political power. It was in fact the Tausug that controlled the Sulu Sultanate in the south, with the lineage of Tausug sultans and high-ranking officials dating as far back as the 15th century.
Lanong vessel is a large outrigger warships used by the Iranon and Balangi people of the Philippines. Garay were traditional native warship of the Bangi people in the Philippines. In the 18th and 19th centuries, they were commonly used for piracy by the Bangi and Iranon people against unarmed trading ships and raids on coastal settlements in the regions surrounding of the Sulu Sea. Next, Salisipan vessel, often used by the Ilanon and Balingingi people of the Philippines for piracy and raids for coastal areas. This weapon called Spanish firearm, limitations and inaccurate, took several steps to reload and only have 3 shots per minute. Ancient weapon of the Moro people. Moro Kris, a weapon of warfare and ceremony. These are not only carried by slave riders into battles but also by nobles and high-ranking officials of the Southern Sultanate, double-edged with either smooth or wavy blades. The carving is for easily slashing. It would be penetrate the bone and would stick, making it hard to pull. Next is Kampilan, longest the sword used by the Ilanons. Heavy single-edged swords, often adorned with hair to make it look even intimidating. And at the tip of the blade, a projecting blunt side was used to pick up the head of a decapitated body. And Barong, deadly weapon sword used by the Tausug warriors with single-edged leaf blade made of thick, tempered steel, used to enclose hand-to-hand battle to catch Spanish firearms down.
Failed to completely subjugate Moros, while Spain conquered portion of Mindanao. The Sulu Sultanate also submitted to protectorate status through Spain's extensive use of military resources after century of Spanish failure to completely subjugate Moro land. Demoralizing attack by Moro warriors against the Spanish continue up until the American occupation, where the Moro Wars against American occupation began. Cause of fighting the Moros and the Spanish ay matapos ipinapaalam ng gobyerno ng Amerika sa Moro na ipinapatuloy nila ang lumang protektorat sa relasyon ng mayroon sila sa Espanya. Tinanggihan ito ng mga Moro Sulu Sultan at hiniling na makipag-usap sa isang bagong kasunduan. Nilagdaan ng Estados Unidos ang Kirambay's Treaty kasama ang Moro Sulu Sultanate na ginagarantiyahan ang autonomiya ng Sultanate sa panloob na mga gawain at pamamahala nito. Kabilang ang Artikulo 10, ginagarantiyahan ang pangangalaga ng pang-aalipin, habang ang Amerika ay nakipag-ugnayan sa mga dayuhang relasyon nito. Upang maiwasan ang mga Moro ng digmaang Pilipinong-Amerikano nang masakop ng mga Amerikano ang hilagang Pilipino. Ang kasunduang Bites kasama ang Moro ay inaayos ng mga Amerikano sa pamamagitan ng pagtanggal ng Artikulo 10 at sinalakay ang Moro land.
The Spanish-Moro conflict, or in the Filipino, Sagupaang Kastila at Moro, was a series of battles in the Philippines lasting over several centuries. It began during the Spanish era and lasted until the Spanish-American War, when Spain finally began to subjugate the Moro people over centuries of failing to do so.